Welcome to Secrets Revealed, the Holy Bible. Today we're looking at Genesis chapter 24. There are 67 verses. In verse 1, we read, Abraham was old, advanced in days. In the Masoretic, it says, well stricken in age. Some would take this to mean stricken as in an affliction, as in a negative connotation. Advanced in days sounds more pleasant, doesn't it? It doesn't seem to imply that his health was compromised or in any way not optimal. Verse 2 reads, I pray thee, in the Masoretic. Whereas in the Septuagint, Abraham simply instructs his servant to put his hand under his thigh. In verse 9, it is seen repeated that his servant did in fact put his hand under the thigh of his master, Abraham. This begs the question, what does this mean? Does this mean that he placed his hand over his genitals? Or is this simply his master sitting on his hand? I looked up this question in Korah and other places, but some understand this to mean to put your hand on the genitals or under the genitals. However, logic and reasoning and propriety would seem to lean towards a more simple understanding that it was most likely under the thigh or near the hip, possibly below the knee. But in an alternate answer, it says here that some people understand this to mean one person would effectively sit on the other person's hand, while that other person would swear to do what was bid of him. This was a distinct action that was only between an inferior to a superior. It was not done between two people of equal status. So this was likely a common practice at the time, and everyone present in this context would understand its significance and importance in this historical context. This isn't a policy mentioned in the Torah. However, it is a traditional custom of the day, similar to placing one's hand over your heart or on the Bible, or pinky swearing, crossing pinkies. I don't believe it was in any way sexual or simply a custom of the day that was easily understood. Looking at the next verse, we see here in verse 11, the servant of Abraham rested his camels versus he made his camels to kneel down. Verse 14 says, Rebekah was a virgin, the virgin, versus the damsel. It also says, Master Abraham, my master Abraham versus my Adon, my Lord. So he specifically calls him by name. Verse 15, he spoke in his mind, the servant, speaking in his mind versus speaking, which implies he was speaking out loud in an audible way. Verse 21, the man took great notice of her, versus in the empty wondering at her. 22, she was given golden earrings by the man, by the servant of Abraham, versus a golden earring. 26, he was well pleased, versus bowed down. This is redundant because worshiping is automatically bowing in that culture, in that time. Verse 27, the servant of Abraham says that Jehovah, the Elohim of my master Abraham, who has not suffered his righteousness to fail, nor his truth from my master. And Jehovah has brought me prosperously to the house of the brother of my Adon. Verses what we read in the Masoretic. My Adon of Abraham, the Elohim, who was not left destitute. So leaving someone destitute versus not letting his righteousness to fail is a big difference. Leaving someone not destitute is a very low standard to set. Leaving them destitute of his mercy and his truth versus not suffering his righteousness to fail or his truth. So the big difference here is righteousness versus mercy, and I being in the way. Jehovah led me to the house versus, and Jehovah has brought me prosperously. He's not only being led, but prosperously led. Verse 32, we see here, and the man entered into the house, unloaded the camels, gave the camels straw and water to wash his feet, the servant, and the feet of the men that were with him. Who is this man? I once understood this to mean, previously to the study of this chapter, as the servant of Abraham doing all these things. No, in fact, it is Laban, the brother of Rebekah. Verse 36 reads, Master, after he had grown old. So it says here, the servant recounting the story, that it refers to Sarah bearing a son after he had grown old, Abraham, versus the Masoretic saying when she was old. Verse 41 reads, my curse, you shall be clear from my curse, versus my oath. I'm not sure why this was translated as such, but it says oath in the latter half of 41. Verse 43, and the daughters of the men of the city come forth to draw water. So this is a specific period during the day, whereas that is omitted from the Masoretic in that verse. Verse 44, notice the behavior of Rebekah. She was a person who had a heart to take care of not only the servant of Abraham, who was a stranger to her, but also his animals. They say you can tell a lot about a person's heart by how they treat animals. And on her, he placed the earrings. I believe that's in 44. No, it's still a ways away, but it says here, let me just pause it for a moment. So in verse 47, we read that he placed on her the earrings versus I put the earring upon her face. Some may use this to justify facial piercing, such as nose piercings, eyebrow piercings for women. But clearly, we read here, these are, in fact, earrings for the ears, and it cannot be interpreted in any other way. Verse 48, being well pleased, I worshipped Jehovah, and I blessed Jehovah, the Elohim of my master, Abraham, who has prospered me. Verses in the MT says, well pleased, who led me. So well pleased was omitted completely from the MT. It's not there. And it says that he led me in the right way, similar to what we read earlier. Mercifully and justly in verse 49, verses kindly and truly. Verse 44, he went to sleep. 54, he went to sleep the servant of Abraham, and the man with him, versus and tarried all night. The reason I bring this up is because in our modern vernacular, tarrying all night means to wait all night and being awake. But the ancient understanding means to sleep. So in that context, it would be easily understood that, yes, these are alike and very much synonyms. However, in our modern day way of speech, this would not be understood as sleeping. This would be understood as waiting. That's why I clarified this. Verse 59, we see here that her goods, Rebekah was sent forth with the servant with her goods. Verses in the empty, it says her nurse. This is a big, this brings up a big question based on which translation you use. One would then question, how old was Rebekah if she had a nurse? That calls into question how old was Rebekah, period. According to the Book of Jasher, it says that she was 10 years old. According to many commentaries, she was even as young as 3 years old. However, Jasher does say 10. I believe that's at least the minimum. In many cultures, there are women who are getting married as early as 12 years old. 12 years old in some cultures. So my personal opinion is that she was, at bare minimum, whether she was 10 or 12, she had reached the age of puberty. I am leaning towards her being a minimum of 13 years old, which would be the start of puberty, to as old as 20 years old. We do know, according to Jasher, that Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. But in any case, using the wisdom of Elohim, Isaac would be a reasonable man to wait until she would reach a childbearing age and would not force or hurt a child. However, if we notice earlier in this chapter that the servant of Abraham noticed that she was very beautiful. That was earlier here in verse 16. The virgin was very beautiful in appearance. How can a young girl before puberty, prepubescent, appear to an older man as very beautiful without him being somewhat creepy? That's why I do lean to the understanding, to the opinion that she was at least 12, 13 years old. I'm going to say 13. And between 13 to 20 years old. Because a girl or a woman of that age, between 13 to 20, really cannot give consent to leave and to make decisions on her own. An important one, such as leaving her parents and their secure, the security they provide, and going to someone they may not be familiar with on a personal level, although they do know Abraham and Sarah, since they are family. Verse 60 reads, thousands, you are a sister, become you thousands of myriads, versus become you the mother of thousands of millions. Verse 62 says that Isaac went through the wilderness to the well of the vision, versus Isaac came from the way of the well Lahai Roi. Verse 64, and she alighted briskly from the camel, versus she alighted, which seems to imply she did so casually without any rush. However, in the Septuagint, you can feel and picture the excitement they both felt when they saw each other for the first time, running to meet each other. However, she did cover herself with a veil. I did further research into this topic of how old girls married back in medieval times and ancient times, and they just varied but we're roughly between 10 to 18. That was roughly the average age that women got married or girls were married. It's 12 to 18 years old. That is why I do lean on this opinion that she was at least minimum 13 years old to as old as 20 years old. This is Genesis 24. I thank you for your time. Jehovah bless you and make your way prosperous. Until then, the next episode will be Genesis chapter 25. This is Secrets Revealed, the Holy Bible.